The recording is now happening. So again, if you can all mute yourself, everybody please. I keep trying, but it seems like since so many people are coming in, I think not everybody is muted the second that they come in. Now, I am gonna do the breathing tonight as I've been doing, but there's something else I just wanna focus on for a moment. I'm sure I'm not alone. It's starting to hit the COVID virus people in my life. I have more than one person that is important to me in critical care. And I'm quite sad about that, as I'm sure that any of you in the similar situation, and I'm sure there are many of you, will also be. So I wanted to start tonight with a prayer for all of those people. And it's not just the people in my life, it's everybody. So if you want to send out this energetic prayer from all of us to anybody in your life and you want to make that public, you can use the chat feature to put that person's name. Or if you're savvy, you can actually also just do it to me privately if you're uncomfortable having everybody see the name of a person. So somebody in your life that you know who either you're concerned that they won't be well through this or right now is not. And we'll take a moment, right? Because if we are showing up for this, we're well enough to do that. Have our eyes downcast or closed. And there might be a lot of sadness if there are people that you know who are unwell, seriously unwell right now from COVID-19 or anything else. But if we can take them into our hearts and not let that sadness completely overtake us, so that there's collective space for us to send love and healing to all of those people. Can we do that? Can we find the space beyond the sadness collectively? The space of wisdom, of well-wishing. And just genuinely, from the energy inside you and the collective energy from the almost 200 people that you're sharing this time with, send those individual people and all those on the planet suffering right now your wish of healing. And can we all together imagine that that wish is coming from not just our individual hearts, our energy centers, whatever you believe in, but from the collective. And send it out. I like to imagine myself that a golden light is cascading over those for whom I am sending healing. So maybe you want to do that too. We can all do that together. Or if that doesn't speak to you, that's fine. Do what does. Follow your intuition. And let us all set the intention that we will practice together this evening, not only for our own well-being, but for the well-being of all those suffering right now, highlighting the names that people have put here. May they be well. May they be well. Thank you, everybody. Thank you. So, for the last 2 weeks, I've been doing these sessions, and each time I do, I've been focusing on something that is both somehow speaking to us psychologically and also has a physiological underpinning. What I want to focus on tonight is the smoothing out of the breath, keeping it really, really delicate with even speed, with even volume, if we can hear ourselves breathing, and many of us will because we'll be doing Ujjayi breath, with equal energy throughout. And I have talked in other sessions about our vagus nerve, the longest of our cranial nerves, and the major nerve mediating the parasympathetic autonomic response. And the vagus courses throughout the viscera and is lacing the entire respiratory tract. And when we breathe, the vagus sends messages to the brain about the nature of our breathing, helping to evoke specific kinds of responses. So again, we can use our breathing to modify our psychological state and our physiological experience. So the value in this very slow, steady, controlled breathing is that when we do this, we can only do so if we are really in a place of safety. Because if we're running or we're having to mobilize energy, we wouldn't have the capacity to do that. So that really tells the nervous system that we're experiencing safety. Now, the added psychological benefit of this is that in order to keep the breath from the inhale and exhale smooth, steady, controlled in this way, requires so much attention. And so the normal rumination that we might have, even for those of us who do a lot of breathing and are accustomed to it, that it's difficult to do. It is very challenging to ruminate when you're working so hard to create a very specific and subtle aspect of breath. Having said that, if you're newer to breath practices, don't worry about perfecting it. Don't worry if it doesn't feel smooth. That's absolutely fine. Just the attention to doing so will shift the focus of your mind and also be strengthening the messaging from your respiratory system to your neurological system. So it is going to be wonderful practice regardless of where you're coming from. And if you're having any trouble right now because you yourself have COVID-19 or you're just not feeling well, this very kind of subtle, gentle breathing as well can feel helpful. Now, as I've been doing in every other session, we're going to introduce Ujjayi breathing. I love this breath. I think that that's coming across. You know, it translates technically into English as victorious breath. And I was thinking about it today as I was walking my dog in the park. And I thought, of course, it's victorious breath because it's victorious over anxiety, victorious over worry, victorious over agitation in the nervous system, victorious over rumination. It's very potent. So for those of you familiar with how to do Ujjayi breath, I ask you while I'm teaching those who are not to begin it, but to do it so subtly on the inhale and the exhale and really keep the energy so consistent and try not to create too much heat from the breath itself. When we concentrate heavily, that might happen, but not through the breathing. Now, for those of you new to Ujjayi breath, I always teach it only on the inhale at the beginning because it reduces the tendency for pulling in the breath, which is counter to providing this experience of tranquility. So if you're new to it, this is how it sounds. You'll inhale naturally and very subtly, and then the exhale is like this. Like the ocean. So it's often translated in English as ocean breathing. Inhaling subtly, exhaling. And I'm sure each and every one of you have fogged up a window or a mirror. So take up your hand, imagine it is a mirror, look at your shiny, gorgeous face, and don't second guess that it is. Inhale naturally through the nose, and exhale, fog up that mirror with control. Keeping that exhale really steady and smooth. Inhale naturally. Great. One more time. Now, place your hands, your two fingers rather, at the throat. And again, inhale naturally through the nose, but now I want you, rather than to exhale through the mouth, to imagine exhaling through the throat, but letting the breath actually come out of the nose. That's a little bit confusing, right? But you inhale naturally. You exhale through the nose, but you imagine it's coming out of the throat. Because otherwise what can happen is you might have a reverse sniff trying to do it. And this is not going to lead to calm. So instead, you just imagine that you're breathing out of the throat, inhaling naturally, exhaling out of the throat with the mouth closed. And for those of you engaging Ujjayi breath on the inhale and exhale, please just continue. And for those just doing it on the exhale, new to it, imagining a nose at your throat that you're breathing out of. Also just try to keep the breath as steady and smooth as you can. I like to imagine that it's just like silk entering my nose and moving out in the exhale. It feels delicate and light like silk. So again, this practice really calls on us to be aware of the quality of the breath. Not just that we're breathing, not just controlling the breath, but really, really honing in on the quality. And if you can, and I don't want to make this too complicated, because of the value of elongating the exhalation over the inhalation, if you can do that, but keeping that exhalation consistent throughout, not pushing, right? Because once again, and I've said this in other talks, but I'll reiterate, every time you exhale, that same vagus nerve sends signals down to the heart, reducing the rate of beat, reducing the heart rate and the intensity of contraction, giving the heart a rest. So if you do this just so subtly, this breathing, and then you make the exhale longer, you're adding another layer of calm and control to your breath, bringing you possibly, and we're all different right now, into almost a meditative state. A place where the brain is going to struggle a little bit to get involved in rumination. It might struggle with the practice because it's so subtle, but it becomes focused. And maybe you even say to yourself, steady, smooth in, steady, smooth out, because the out is longer. Steady, smooth in, steady, smooth out. And we're going to continue like this. Just continue. Keep saying it. Steady, smooth in. Steady, smooth out. It's like a mantra almost. Or if the idea of a mantra is not your thing, just a focal point for the mind, not just the breath, but the iteration of the mental label. Steady, smooth in, steady, smooth out. Steady, smooth in, steady, smooth out. We're going to practice like this now for the next 5 minutes, just this. This very simple but basic and powerful practice, just this. Just this. The mind wants to do anything else. Oh, this is too simple. Oh, I have other things to do. Okay, just come back. It's just 5 minutes. Just 5 minutes to train your mind, to train your respiratory system, to train your neurological system. It's 5 minutes like this. 5 minutes of truly quality breathing. Steady, smooth, just steady, smooth. And watch for the little places in your breath where it doesn't feel smooth. The knowledge of that those little edges where you feel kind of it moves and then it has a little blip, is so fantastic for learning how to cultivate the calmness in the nervous system. Because as you work on that particular part, again, you gain greater control from the respiratory system over calming down or activating parasympathetic response for more physiologically accurate terminology. So you don't have to be able to smooth it, just noticing that and working very delicately towards it. This is useful. Always delicately. Always patiently. We have 2 more minutes like this. Steady, smooth in. Steady, smooth out. Just this. A true asana is one where you're there with great ease, where the breath is completely and utterly under your control and smooth. And so as we sit here and we breathe in this way, even though we're not in a yoga pose, we are truly in asana. An asana means yoga pose, by the way, for anybody unsure of that or unfamiliar with the language. Okay. So take your last really controlled breath like this. And we're going to add something to the mix. So we know, by the way, there are certain things that we can do to really smooth out the breath. Probably the best one ever is playing the didgeridoo, but I don't know how to do that. And I heard it's really difficult, and I don't think I could teach it in a half an hour. But singing is another, and we can all sing, or we can just chant Om. So what we're going to do for the next 3 minutes is I'm going to invite you to chant Om with me. For anybody uncomfortable with chanting Om, as often I do when I work within the NHS, I have people sing home because maybe you don't like the spiritual association. We're all different. So you can say home, home. And the breathing actually brings you home. So it's very apropos. Or if you don't want to do either of those things, you can just sing, right? The act of singing helps to elongate the breath and trains your respiratory tract. So let's join in together, and you can follow me or you can do your own thing and have your own little concert. Remember, you're doing it with almost 200 people, even though you can't hear them. As you continue, really try to keep the breath that comes out even. And it's a little bit challenging with Om because you're doing so you're changing, but we'll work towards it as we continue. Two more together. And now come back to the controlled Ujjayi breathing. Steady, smooth in, steady, smooth out for the next 2 minutes. See how this has affected it. If not at all, okay. Maybe you don't need to do any chanting or singing. But for many of us, we will feel a slight shift in the quality of the breath control. Singing affords us that, chanting, whatever it is you feel comfortable with. And remember, if you're new, it's just on the exhale that you're doing the Ujjayi or ocean breathing. And if you're seasoned with practice, it's on the inhale and the exhale. Steady, smooth in, steady, smooth out. We're going to practice this way for 1 more minute. So really focus the mind. And now we move to our short meditation, where we are not controlling the breath, where we are now just watching it, where for many of us in this moment, it becomes easier to watch the breath because we have been focusing on it so ardently for 20 minutes plus. And so we can feel the inhale naturally coming into the nose and the exhale passing out. the rising and falling of the abdominal cavity. We can really feel ourselves breathing. Or sometimes, as I say, we can feel ourselves being breathed. And as the mind goes away, as it tells you there are other things to do, or it gets involved in worry and fear, or future and past thinking, just bring it back. Bring it back to this subtle object, the breath. This place where you can keep returning to. And as you do, you develop more and more clarity because the mind quiets and you can finally just start to think wisely without all that discursive thought, without all the chatter. And so you watch the breath and you bring it back. And the thinking arises as it always does, and you notice, and then you bring it back. You bring it back with interest, falling in love with each and every breath. Rumi talks about this. Just coming back to each breath, as though it were completely new. You welcome it, you watch it, and you let it pass before a new one arises. And like a guest, you give it your attention, even if there's something else you need to do, or you think you need to do. Keep coming back to the quality of breath, to the inhale. And if you want to help yourself by just saying, inhaling, inhaling, exhaling, exhaling, so that the mind can more easily reside in the flow of breath, do so. I always do that in my meditation. I remind the mind its object of attention. So I am reminding, bringing the mind back to what I want it to be focused on. As my teacher used to say, make sure you learn how to use the mind and that the mind doesn't use you, because it will if you don't train it. Now we're about to move from the breath and meditation portion into questions, which I always answer for the last 15 minutes. Before I do, though, I want you to just remember this quality, to try to bring it back to your conscious awareness and to repeat this, because it's wonderful that you have joined me now. I am grateful, but you will only really benefit if you continue to practice, whether it's with me or on your own. So make that personal vow or commitment, or whatever word you want to use. And remember that also we committed this practice to other beings, to those who are not well right now. Now, just a few announcements. So first of all, I'm doing another session at 8 a.m., but not through the Minded Institute, through HealthFlix, which is a service that I launched with a bunch of other people yesterday. And we have lots of different talks from leading lights in mind-body practices that you can watch, and you can have interactive sessions. I'm putting it in the chat. You can have interactive sessions with through this medium in a webinar where you can ask questions, or you can watch it on YouTube. Just put in HealthFlix into YouTube, and it's HealthFlix Original. And you can see talks like from Ruby Wax, who spoke today, Matthew Taylor, myself in the morning, and amazing people. Now, the other thing, I know some individuals have asked to learn more. So I still have the Rewiring Your Anxious Brain going. And we have a few spaces for next Tuesday. So if you go onto the Minded Institute website, it's only 25 pounds for 2 hours to learn about how neurologically yoga can be used for positive neuroplastic change for anxiety. So you can sign up for that, but those spaces go really, really quickly. I have to keep running them. So maybe sign up soon. And if you want to understand much more about respiratory physiology, and you also want to understand how in yoga therapy, I conduct breath assessments and how you can then learn to conduct them with clients either in person or online to better understand their respiratory needs. That's on the site for Monday, but both of those get filled up really quickly. So please sign up ASAP if you want a spot on those. I keep trying to run them weekly, but it's a lot of demand. Now, aside from that, there are other things on the website, like mental health skills for yoga teachers, which are whole day courses. You can look, but those two things seem to be going like hotcakes. So I wanted to let you know right now. And now I'm going to open it up for questions. So if you like, you can raise your hand if you have a question about respiratory physiology. My background, if you don't know, is in neuroscience, respiratory physiology, psychotherapy, and yoga therapy. So if I can answer your question, I will. There is a raise the hand feature where it says participant underneath the pictures, or if you can't find it, you can just unmute yourself if you're dying to ask a question. And if there are no questions, that's also okay. I don't mind. Right? I'm just here to help the best that I can.
Hi, I had a question, Heather.
Okay, so Sue, you go first and then Michelle second. Go ahead.
Physiologically, how is this different, beneficial or not, if you're lying down? I often have people do this breath awareness when they're lying down in semi-supine, or I've been sitting up now, or in the postures. I mean, I'm fascinated by this.
Okay, so in the postures is different because you require much more capacity over respiratory control in order to do it. And depending on the pose, it can be easier or harder. So when you do something like this in asana, you're really advancing somebody's capacity. But obviously, you cannot call on the brain to be as quiet when it's getting so much in feedback from movement as you would from just sitting still. So that would be a big difference. Now, in terms of sitting up versus lying down, I think the differences aren't going to be quite as pronounced. But for clients who are heavier, often lying down completely can obstruct the ability.
I lost your sound.
Sorry, I muted myself. My apologies. So for larger clients, when they lie down, the adipose fat can actually obstruct the ability to breathe with ease. And also for individuals for whose trachea, the smooth muscle has gone very flaccid, and that's often in older age. So for those individuals, being upright, or at least at a diagonal, it's going to be preferable than just lying straight down flat. Yeah?
Yeah.
I hope that that's helpful.
Yeah, really interesting. Yeah, because in a class you've got different body sizes, haven't you? So
yes.
Yeah, I haven't done much of this because I have so many different people, and yeah.
But you can make allowances. You can say that, you know, you can say, rather than saying if your body is larger, you can just say if you're struggling a little to breathe on the inhale, elevate your upper back if they're lying down. And that often will help a lot.
I normally ask people to get in a comfortable position to them so they can choose the comfortable position.
And that's great, but sometimes people don't know what is comfortable to them. So sometimes you need to give some cues.
Yeah.
Anyway, Sue, I need to answer the next question, but it was a great question and thank you for it.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Michelle Levy, you're up next.
Hi, thank you. So it's a bit of a big question, which you might not be able to answer all now, but just some, if you have any advice for, I have some students who are asthmatic, yeah, for strengthening the lungs, or Yeah.
I mean, there are so many different techniques, and you know what? This has come up every single time I run these breath classes is, can you give techniques for asthmatics? So what I'm gonna do on HealthFlix next week, I'm going to ask the person who I know is the biggest expert within this field, even though I do know a lot of different things that we can do, to actually give a 35-minute presentation just on that. But so that you're all aware, and I've said it before, there's this paradoxical response with parasympathetic evocation and what happens in the lungs. So we might imagine that if we're super relaxed, that the muscle within the lungs, the smooth muscle, will also relax. But actually, the smooth muscle can tighten with parasympathetic activation. So that is paradoxical. So sometimes these calming techniques actually can have the reverse effect. One of the simplest things that you can all do for asthmatics is just teach very gentle, slow breathing. That's generally acceptable and will not cause negative effects. I know that a bunch of people also benefit from focusing on doing the breathing coming from the nose to the toes and back up, because there's often a big fear response during breath. And so there needs to be something else for the brain and the mind to be focusing on. And then finally, Kapalabhati can be helpful, but it's complicated, and if taught inaccurately, can have the complete reverse response. So in order to understand how to use that, you have to do quite a lot of training. I hope that's a very basic answer to your question. And I will make sure that Richard Brown, Dr. Richard Brown, who is a psychiatrist and a leader in the breath movement in the United States, he and his wife wrote The Healing Power of Breath, that he will give a talk on that. I haven't asked him, but he's my friend, so I'm committing him. He's giving 2 or 3 other talks, but I'm going to ask him to give this one because it's of such importance to so many people.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Anything else? I see no other hands up. If there's, oh, okay. Lana Solomons. Okay, so actual hands rather than the little blue one.
Actual hands. Are these safe techniques for people who have heart conditions, blood pressure, and any other? We've just discussed asthma, but I'm thinking about heart atrial fibrillation. I'm teaching students from 60 plus, and a lot of people have many issues. And I don't know how safe these practices are.
In fact, yeah, the slow controlled breathing is very safe. And the elongation of the exhalation is specifically useful for people with cardiac problems. Because as I said, your vagus nerve articulates to the sinoatrial node of the heart. I'm being more specific now. And every time you exhale, there is an increased firing rate from the vagus nerve to the sinoatrial node, actually reducing the heart rate and giving the heart a rest. The other technique that is really beneficial, you said in atrial fibrillation, and there's actually been research being done on that, or have done on that in the past, is the coherent breathing, which I've talked about in other seminars that I've given, which is an inhale of 6 and an exhale of 6, or in some iterations of it, an inhale of 5 and an exhale of 5. And it not only supports a reduction of stress on the heart, but it helps people with these cardiac issues where it affects the ability for the blood to effectively be picked up, for the oxygen to be effectively picked up by the blood due to issues with what we call ventilation and perfusion, and it maximizes levels of efficiency. So these techniques are not only safe, but really helpful. You can look into the research of somebody called Luciano Bernardi, B-E-R-N-A-R-D-I, Luciano Bernardi.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Okay, Michael. Hi, Michael. Yes, what would you like to query or add? You're on mute, so I can't hear you.
Thanks for another lovely talk.
My pleasure.
And quiet meditation. Have you come across abnormally slow heart rate? Because I'd be worried about too much parasympathetic activation for somebody with that condition.
Somebody in what condition? with atrial fibrillation.
Yeah, brachycardia, where the resting heart rate is abnormally low.
I don't usually work with people with tachycardia where the heart rate is usually abnormally low. It's less common than, having brachycardia. But the thing is that with the coherent rate specifically, you are enhancing both sympathetic and parasympathetic output. And it
Yes.
is the technique that generally cardiologists that understand pranayama are suggesting. Now, I don't want to say across the board anything is going to always be safe for anyone. But I would say that, given that this technique is used with acute health populations,
Yeah.
even after myocardial infarction, that they
Uh-huh.
should be safe.
Mhm.
But always
Thank you.
check with somebody, what is their unique response to something?
Of course. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Anyone else before we head off into our evenings, or if you're in a different time zone, into whatever time you are in? I understood that slow exhale is useful because it slows the dropping of carbon dioxide. Actually, it does not slow the dropping. Yeah, wait. It slows the dropping of carbon dioxide. Yes, so it is increasing levels of carbon dioxide in the blood nominally. That's also true. And in so doing, because I have to mute everybody, we have background noise. Because carbon dioxide is a vasodilator, it does enhance oxygen delivery. But you're going to get that particular benefit a little bit more from having teeny pauses after the exhalation, but you will still derive it from this, yes. Mary Rose, you have a question. Would you like to ask it? Haven't
Yes.
seen you for a few days. Hi. Hi, Mary Rose.
Hi, thank you.
My pleasure.
I know you haven't talked about CPOD.
Mm-hmm.
but I've
COPD.
got a-
Yeah.
Yeah, well, with dyslexia, I've got a very close friend who knows I do coherent breathing, and she's been pushing me to teach her.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything at this moment I can just offer that she could do? She's on 12 weeks lockdown.
Again, the coherent breathing has been shown in research to be useful for COPD, both for reducing sympathetic arousal, which is common as a result of the strenuous work of breathing, and also for potentially the increased matching between perfusion and ventilation. For those of you that want to stay on, I'll describe what that is because it's quite interesting and you'll understand more clearly. So perfusion in this case, right, because it has a more global understanding in physiology, but in this case is when you have the maximum amount of blood arriving at the pulmonary wall. And when you link that up to the maximum amount of oxygen in the lungs at the same exact moment, you have the greatest capacity for the oxygen to move into the bloodstream and to be attached to the hemoglobin. And for people where there is a reduced capacity for perfusion, for the movement across the lung wall because of damage, they need to do things that will help to support this. And coherent breathing maximizes that capacity. So it's uniquely good for people with COPD. Now, in later stage COPD, they will have a very hard time coming to that rate. So you need to build it very, very slowly and patiently with them.
Okay.
Okay?
I
Thank
will.
you.
I feel okay to do it now. Thank
Yeah,
you.
but start at like inhale 2, exhale 2, and then move up with them slowly, slowly. Their lungs are not in the position to be pushed beyond capacity. Slowly, slowly, as they say in Thailand, slowly, slowly, catchy monkey, right? Don't go quick into that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else in the last minute? I know there were some questions in the chat, but I can't look at that and also speak, so I haven't been able to answer those. But anyway, the biggest thing I would request of all of you is to just share these practices, let other people know that you think would benefit from these free seminars as well, because I'm really trying to reach out and help. What about someone suffering from pneumonia? Okay, I have to tell you, I'm not really an infectious disease expert, but I was asked to help some people at Imperial that were supporting the COVID ward. Even with pneumonia, if you do just very, very subtle but slower breathing, it can be helpful. that won't be risky even in pneumonia. I don't want to provide any further advice because obviously that's a much more risky situation, and that's not a lifestyle thing. That's infectious disease, but just gentle, slow breathing that will help. And that doesn't have to be at the coherent rate. People probably won't be able to reach that when they have pneumonia. Thank you so much for showing up, for staying. I'm a lover of physiology. As you can see, you know, I start kind of subtly, and then at the end I get into the meat of it because I really like talking about the brain and physiology. I hope to see you guys again, and maybe at one of the other sessions if you're interested in, you know, rewiring the brain or pranayama or whatever it is. And we're on the free HealthFlix talks. So be well, take care. May all of the people we've sent our prayers to also be well.